Have you ever screamed until your throat tasted like blood? But nobody looked back. Imagine being 18, thinking you've finally found your place in the world, only to be dragged out of your home in the middle of the night and thrown into a forest that no wolf dares to enter. They didn't just exile Ivy Sterling. They fed her to the shadows. They thought she would die by sunrise. They thought her story ended in the dark. But they forgot one thing: the forest has eyes. And the man watching from the shadows wasn't a monster. He was the king they all feared. This is the story of how the unwanted girl became the nightmare of those who betrayed her. Grab your tissues and lock your doors. This is part 1. The gravel crunched violently beneath the tires of the 2021 Ford Raptor, the sound echoing like gunshots in the silence of the night. Inside the cab, the heater was blasting, but Ivy Sterling couldn't feel her fingers. They were zip-tied too tightly behind her back, the plastic biting into her wrists, cutting off circulation until her hands were numb dead weights. She wasn't crying anymore. She had cried for 3 hours straight, begging, pleading with Alpha Brett Calloway, her mate, the man who had promised her the world just 2 weeks ago. Now looking at the side of his face, illuminated by the green glow of the dashboard, she saw nothing but cold, hard granite. "Brett, please," Ivy whispered, her voice hoarse. "You know I didn't steal the Luna's necklace. You know I didn't poison Sasha. Why won't you look at me?" Brett gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He didn't look at her. He looked at the road, specifically at the sign passing by on the right. Entering Blackwood Ridge. State-restricted area. Do not enter. Locals in the town of North Creek, Oregon, didn't call it Blackwood Ridge. They called it the Dead Zone. It was 50,000 acres of dense, ancient pine where GPS signals died and compasses spun in circles. Wolves didn't go there. Humans didn't go there. Legend said it was the hunting ground of the ancients' wolves who had lost their humanity centuries ago. "Shut up, Ivy," Brett finally said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired. That hurt worse. "The evidence was in your drawer. The toxicity report on Sasha came back positive for wolfsbane. The same wolfsbane found under your mattress." "I was framed." Ivy surged forward, hitting her shoulder against the dashboard. "Sasha has wanted you since we were kids." She planted it. "Check the cameras in the hallway." "Brett, just check the timestamps from October 14th. "The footage was corrupted," Brett said flatly. "Just like your morality." He slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on the wet asphalt, the tail fishtailing slightly before coming to a halt right at the edge of the tree line. The headlights cut into the forest, illuminating thick, gnarled trunks that looked like twisted limbs reaching for the sky. The fog was low, clinging to the ground like a shroud. Brett killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. He opened his door, the chime ding, 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 sounding oblivious to the brutality happening. He walked around to the passenger side, yanked the door open and grabbed Ivy by the arm. He didn't help her down. He pulled. Ivy tumbled out of the high cab, her knees slamming into the wet, cold mud. The impact knocked the wind out of her. She gasped, rolling onto her side, trying to push herself up, but with her hands bound, she was helpless. "Brett!" she screamed as he reached into his pocket. She thought he was reaching for a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a pocket knife. He knelt beside her, and for a split second, she thought he was going to cut her bonds. She thought he was going to say it was all a test, a sick, twisted alpha loyalty test. Instead, he grabbed a handful of her hair, her long, honey-colored hair that he used to love, and sawed through a lock of it. He pocketed the hair. "Proof of death," he muttered. "The council requires it for the exile records." "You're not exiling me," Ivy choked out. staring up at him through the mist. Exiles get a bag. They get a head start. You're executing me. You're feeding me to them. Brett stood up, towering over her. He looked down, his eyes flashing amber. For a second, his wolf was near the surface, but it wasn't fighting for her. It was agreeing with him. That was the ultimate betrayal. Even his wolf didn't want her. If you're innocent, Brett said, his voice void of emotion, then maybe the moon goddess will protect you. But looking at you now, a Omega with no family, no status, and a criminal record, I doubt she's watching. He turned his back. Brett, what's on source? Ivy screamed to the sound raw and tearing at her vocal cords. I am your mate, the bond. Can't you feel it tearing? Brett paused with his hand on the door handle. He didn't turn around. I rejected the bond 10 miles back, Ivy. I feel nothing. He climbed in. The engine roared to life. The massive tires spun, spraying mud and gravel into Ivy's face. She squeezed her eyes shut, turning her head as the truck peeled away. She watched the red taillights shrink into the distance, smaller and smaller, until the darkness of the Oregon night swallowed them whole. Ivy was alone. She lay there for a long time, the cold seeping through her thin denim jacket. It was a staggering 38 degrees, unusually cold for early autumn. She could feel the vibration of the earth, the hum of the forest. But unlike the woods near her pack house, which felt alive and welcoming, Blackwood Ridge felt hungry. She had to move. If she stayed on the roadside, a human patrol might find her. Or worse, she'd freeze. But entering the tree line meant entering the territory of the things that watch. Ivy struggled to her knees. She looked around for anything sharp to cut the zip ties. There was a jagged rock near the base of a fir tree. She shimmied over to it, gasping as the rough bark scraped her cheek. She turned her back to the rock and began to saw the plastic against the stone. Scrape. 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 It took 20 minutes. Her wrists were bleeding raw and stinging. But finally, snap. The pressure released. Ivy brought her hands forward, rubbing the deep red grooves in her skin. She checked her pockets. Empty. Brett had taken her phone, her wallet, even the locket her grandmother gave her. She had nothing. Just the clothes on her back, a torn Silver Falls high, hoodie jeans and worn-out Converse sneakers. A twig snapped. It wasn't the snap of a small animal. It was the heavy, deliberate snap of something bearing weight. Ivy froze. Her wolf, a small, timid creature named Nova, whimpered in the back of her mind. Run, Ivy. Run now. She scrambled to her feet, backing away toward the dense brush. Hello, she whispered, immediately regretting it. From the darkness of the trees about 50 yards away, 2 eyes appeared. They weren't amber like a normal wolf, or yellow like an Omega. They were red. Blood red. And they were high off the ground, too high for a wolf. A massive silhouette stepped out from behind a giant oak. It looked like a wolf, but it stood on 2 legs, hunched over its fur, matted and thick. A rogue. No rogues were just wolves without packs. This was something else. This was a feral. Ivy turned and ran. She didn't care about the thorns tearing at her jeans or the branches whipping her face. She sprinted into the darkness of Blackwood Ridge, blindly plunging deeper into the one place she was told never to go. Behind her, a howl ripped through the night. It wasn't a howl of communication. It was a dinner bell. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs felt like jelly. She scrambled up a steep embankment, her fingers digging into the wet soil, and threw herself over a ridge, sliding down the other side into a ravine. She landed hard in a pile of dead leaves and lay still, holding her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Silence returned, but it was a heavy silence, the silence of being watched. Ivy looked up. She was in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines that blocked out the moon. And there, sitting on a large rock formation, 20 feet above her, was a figure. It wasn't the feral. It was a man. He was sitting casually, one leg draped over the other, dressed in a dark, tactical suit that blended perfectly with the shadows. He was smoking a cigarette, the tiny orange ember the only light in the clearing. He didn't look at her. He was looking up at the sky, blowing a plume of smoke into the mist. Ivy blinked, wondering if she was hallucinating from the shock. "Help," she croaked. The man slowly turned his head. Even in the darkness, she could feel the weight of his gaze. It felt heavier than the gravity holding her to the earth. He didn't say a word. He just took another drag of his cigarette, his eyes locking onto hers. They were silver, not grey. Silver, like liquid mercury. He flicked the cigarette butt down. It landed near Ivy's shoe, still smouldering. "You're loud," the man said. His voice was deep, vibrating through the clearing like a low-frequency bass. "And you smell like betrayal." Ivy trembled, pushing herself back against the dirt wall of the ravine. "Who are you?" The man stood up. He was massive, easily 6'5", his shoulders broad enough to block out the stars. He didn't climb down the rocks. He leaped, landing silently on the soft earth, just 3 feet from her. "The better question," he said, tilting his head as he studied her trembling form, "is why Alpha Brett thought he could dump his trash in my backyard without paying the toll." Ivy's blood ran cold. He knew Brett. He knew where she came from. "Please," Ivy whispered, tears finally spilling over. "Don't kill me. I didn't do it." The man stepped closer, crouching down until he was eye level with her. The scent hitting her was overwhelming rain cedar and something metallic like cold steel. It was the scent of power. Raw, unfiltered power that made her Wolf Nova bow her head in submission instantly. "I know you didn't," the man said, his silver eyes narrowing. "I watched him plant the wolfsbane myself." Ivy's jaw dropped. You saw." "I see everything in these woods, little wolf," he murmured. He reached out his hand, hovering near her face. She flinched, but he didn't strike her. He brushed a stray leaf from her cheek, his thumb grazing her skin. The touch sent a shock wave of electricity through her body, so intense it made her gasp. He pulled his hand back as if he had been burned, a strange expression crossing his stoic face. "Get up," he commanded, standing abruptly and turning away. Where are we going?" Ivy stammered, struggling to her feet. The man didn't look back. He started walking into the deeper, darker part of the woods. "You have 2 choices, Ivy Sterling," he called out over his shoulder. "Stay here and let the ferals finish what your mate started, or follow me and learn how to hunt them back." Ivy looked back at the ridge where she had come from. She looked at the darkness surrounding her. Then she looked at the broad back of the stranger with silver eyes. She took a step forward. "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice slightly stronger. He stopped, glancing back. A flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and for a second she saw the insignia embroidered on the collar of his jacket, a silver crown wrapped in thorns. "My name is Cyrus," he said, "and you're trespassing." The walk through Blackwood Ridge was a blur of shadows and pain. Ivy struggled to keep up with Cyrus's long, predatory strides. Every time she stumbled over a root or slipped on wet moss, she expected him to leave her behind. That's what Brett would have done. Brett would have sighed, checked his watch, and told her she was being dramatic. But Cyrus didn't leave. He didn't offer a hand, nor did he slow down. But every time she fell, he stopped. He would stand perfectly still, 10 feet ahead. His back to her, waiting until the sound of her scrambling footsteps resumed before he started moving again. It was a strange, silent tether. "Why don't the ferals attack us?" Ivy gasped, clutching her side. Her ribs felt bruised from the fall from the truck. The forest around them was alive with sounds. Snaps, growls, the rustle of heavy bodies moving through brush, but nothing approached. "Because they know the hierarchy," Cyrus said without looking back. "They are beasts, Ivy. Beasts understand one thing: the predator at the top of the food chain eats first. As long as you walk in my shadow, you are off menu." His shadow. It was a terrifying place to be, yet it was the safest she had felt in weeks. After an hour of climbing upward, the dense canopy suddenly broke. Ivy stopped, her breath catching in her throat. They weren't just deep in the woods. They were at the summit of a cliff overlooking the entire valley. And nestled into the cliffside wasn't a camp or a cabin. It was a fortress of glass and black steel, modern and sharp, jutting out of the rock like a dagger. It looked like a billionaire's penthouse dropped into the middle of a nightmare. "What is this place?" Ivy whispered. "Home." Cyrus grunted. He approached a massive steel door that had no handle. As he stepped close, a beam of red light scanned his retina. Beep. Access granted. The door hissed open, revealing a warm golden light that spilled out onto the cold forest floor. "Inside a store. Shoes off." "Don't touch anything," Cyrus commanded, walking in. Ivy followed, shivering violently as the warmth of the house hit her frozen skin. The interior was minimalist and expensive. Dark leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the misty forest, and a fireplace large enough to roast a whole deer. Cyrus stripped off his tactical jacket, tossing it onto a chair. Underneath, he wore a tight black t-shirt that strained against muscles carved from stone. His arms were covered in tattoos, runes, Ivy realized, ancient werewolf markings that hadn't been used in centuries. "Sit." He pointed to a stool at the kitchen island. Ivy sat, her teeth chattering. You have electricity. Internet. Everyone says the dead zone kills technology." Cyrus opened a sleek black refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water and a raw steak. He tossed the steak to a massive black wolf dog lying by the fire, a pet Ivy realized with a start, and cracked the water open for himself. "The council tells you the dead zone kills signal, so you won't come looking," Cyrus said, taking a long drink. "They tell you monsters live here, so you won't find the truth. The only thing they are afraid of is me." He walked around the counter, grabbed a first aid kit, and set it down in front of her. Then he did something that made Ivy's heart stop. He reached out and tilted her chin up. Up close, his eyes were mesmerizing. Liquid silver swirling with a storm of suppressed emotion. He looked at the bruise forming on her cheek where the gravel had hit her. "Brett Calloway is a fool," Cyrus murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "He traded a diamond for a piece of glass." Ivy flinched. "He didn't trade me. He discarded me. There's a difference." "Is there?" Cyrus opened a bottle of antiseptic. "This is going to sting." He dabbed the cotton onto her cheek. Ivy hissed, gripping the edge of the counter. Cyrus worked with surprising efficiency and gentleness. He cleaned the cuts on her wrists from the zip ties, his large, rough hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. "Why do you care?" Ivy asked, watching him. "You don't know me. I'm a convicted poisoner. An exile. I know you didn't poison Sasha because I have audio recordings of Sasha buying the wolfsbane from a dealer in the East District 3 weeks ago," Cyrus said casually, as if discussing the weather. Ivy froze. You have proof. You have to give it to the council. We have to go back if they hear the recording. No. The word was sharp, final. Cyrus stopped cleaning her wrist and looked her dead in the eye. "You go back now and they kill you before you reach the steps of the pack house. The council is corrupt, Ivy. Who do you think covers up the evidence Sasha's father is the beta? The investigating enforcer is her cousin." Ivy slumped, the hope draining out of her. "So that's it. My life is over. I just live here hiding." Cyrus finished bandaging her wrist. He stepped back, crossing his arms over his chest. The firelight danced in his silver eyes, making him look like an avenging angel. "That depends," he said. "Do you want to survive, or do you want revenge?" Ivy looked down at her hands. She thought of Brett's cold face. She thought of Sasha's smirk as she was dragged out of the pack house. She thought of the life she had lost, the children she wanted, the home she was building. She looked up a fire, igniting in her green eyes. "I want to burn them to the ground." Cyrus smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a terrifying, predatory grin that promised bloodshed. "Good," he said. "Get some sleep, Ivy. Tomorrow we kill the girl you used to be, and we build a queen in her place." The next morning, Ivy woke up to the smell of coffee and bacon. For a split second, she thought she was back in the pack house. She reached out for Brett, expecting the warmth of her mate. Her hand hit cold, high-thread count sheets. Memory crashed over her like a tidal wave. The exile. The truck. Cyrus. Ivy sat up, gasping. She was in a massive guest bedroom with walls of glass. Outside, the sun was trying to pierce through the eternal fog of Blackwood Ridge. She looked at the bedside table. There was a set of clothes folded neatly, black cargo pants, a tactical thermal shirt, and combat boots. No dresses, no soft Omega cardigans. War clothes. She dressed quickly. The boots were a size too big, but she laced them tight. She found her way to the main living area. Cyrus was standing in front of a massive wall of monitors, at least 20 screens. He was speaking into a headset in a language she didn't recognize. Russian, or maybe ancient, Lycan. He saw her and tapped the headset, ending the call. "Eat?" He pointed to a plate on the table. "You're underweight. You can't fight if a strong breeze knocks you over." Ivy ignored the food. She walked towards the screens. "What are you watching?" "Everything," Cyrus said. Ivy scanned the monitors. She saw street corners in New York, a dock in London, a boardroom in Tokyo. But her eyes locked onto the large center screen. It was a live feed. It was the North Creek Pack Cemetery. "Is that—" Ivy's voice trembled. "Your funeral," Cyrus said, his voice void of sympathy. Live broadcast. They wanted to make sure the neighboring packs knew justice had been served. Ivy walked closer, her hand hovering over the screen. There was a closed casket, an empty box. A photo of her smiling from her high school graduation sat on an easel. And there in the front row stood Alpha Brett. He was wearing a black suit, looking solemn, wiping a tear from his eye. Standing right next to him, clutching his arm for support, was Sasha. Sasha was wearing a black dress that was a little too tight, a little too short for a funeral. And she wasn't crying. She was burying her face in Brett's shoulder, but Ivy knew that posture. She was marking him. "Look at them," Cyrus commanded, stepping up behind Ivy. Look closely. He looks sad, Ivy whispered, a traitorous hope rising in her chest. Maybe he regrets it. Zoom in on Sector 4, Cyrus said to the voice command system. The screen zoomed in on Brett's hand, the one hanging by his side away from Sasha. He was holding a phone. The screen was visible. It was a text message thread. Recipient Sasha. Text. It's done. The transfer of her assets to the PAC fund is complete. We can announce the mating ceremony in a month out of respect. Ivy felt like she had been punched in the gut. The air left her lungs. He's texting her. At my funeral. He never loved you, Ivy. Cyrus said, brutal and honest. He loved your inheritance. Your grandmother left you the land bordering the river, didn't she? The land the PAC Council has wanted to develop for a casino for years. Ivy fell to her knees. The betrayal wasn't just romantic. It was calculated. It was financial. It was total. I didn't know. I thought he chose me. He chose power, Cyrus said. He knelt beside her, not to comfort her, but to level with her. Now look at the back row, far left, by the tree line. Ivy wiped her eyes and looked. Standing apart from the crowd was an old man leaning on a cane and a tall, broad-shouldered man in a grey suit. The tall man was looking at the camera. No, not at the camera, he was looking at the forest. He looked angry. Who are they? Ivy asked. That is Gideon, my second, Cyrus said, and the old man is Elder Thomas, the only member of the council who voted against your exile. They are the only allies you have left. Cyrus stood up and offered a hand. This time he didn't pull away. You have cried enough for Brett Calloway. Cyrus said, his voice low and dangerous. Tears are salt water. They dehydrate you. Rage. Rage is fuel. Ivy took his hand. His grip was iron. He pulled her to her feet effortlessly. What do I do? She asked, her voice hardening. Cyrus walked over to a wall panel and pressed a button. A hidden door slid open, revealing a training room filled with weapons mats and weights. Brett thinks you are an Omega, Cyrus said, walking into the room. Weak. Submissive. Bred to serve. He picked up a weighted staff and tossed it to her. Ivy caught it, surprised by the heaviness. But he missed something, Cyrus continued, circling her. When I found you in the woods, I smelled it, beneath the fear, beneath the Omega scent, masking it. Smelled what? Ivy gripped the staff. Royal blood, Cyrus said softly. Ivy laughed, a dry, humorless sound. My parents were nobodies, orchard workers who died in a car crash. Your adoptive parents were orchard workers, Cyrus corrected. But your blood sings to the ancients, Ivy. You aren't an Omega. You are a latent Alpha. You just haven't triggered yet because you've been suppressed by medication. Ivy's eyes widened. Medication I don't take. She trailed off. The vitamins. Every morning since she was 12, the PAC doctor Sasha's uncle gave her vitamins for her anemia. They kept you weak, Cyrus growled, his eyes flashing silver. Because they knew if you ever woke up, you wouldn't just lead the PAC. You would rule the region. He lunged at her. Ivy screamed instinctively, raising the staff. Clack! She blocked him. It was sloppy, and the impact vibrated up her arms, but she blocked an Alpha King. Cyrus smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Lesson 1, he said. Pain is information. Use it. 3 months passed. They were 90 days of hell, sweat, and blood. The Council of North Creek believed Ivy Sterling was dead. They had issued a death certificate citing exposure and predation. Brett Calloway had moved into the Alpha Mansion's master suite, and Sasha was already redecorating painting over the soft creams Ivy had chosen with garish, expensive golds. But deep in the dead zone, Ivy was not dying. She was being reborn. The first 2 weeks were the hardest. Once Ivy stopped taking the vitamins Dr. Aris Thorne, Sasha's uncle, had prescribed her for a decade, her body went into violent shock. It wasn't just withdrawal. It was a biological huzzing. Ivy lay on the cold bathroom floor of Cyrus's glass fortress, convulsing. Her fever spiked to 106 degrees. Her bones felt like they were liquefying and reforming. "Make it stop," she sobbed, clawing at the tile. "Cyrus, please, just kill me." Cyrus didn't leave her side. For 3 days, the feared Alpha King, the monster of Blackwood Ridge, sat on the floor with her. He packed ice around her burning skin. He force-fed her water. He held her hair back when she retched. "Fight it, Ivy," he whispered into her ear, his voice a low rumble against her feverish skin. "Your blood is fighting the poison. The wolf they tried to kill is waking up. Don't you dare let her die now." On the 14th day, the fever broke. Ivy woke up in her bed. She felt different, lighter. The constant brain fog that had plagued her since childhood was gone. She could hear the heartbeat of a squirrel in the tree outside the glass window, 120 beats per minute. She could smell the coffee brewing downstairs, and she could distinguish that it was Ethiopian roast, not Colombian. She walked to the mirror. The girl staring back was no longer the scrawny, pale Omega. Her muscles were defined. Her skin glowed with vitality, and her green eyes now had a ring of electric gold around the pupil. She went downstairs. Cyrus was in the training room, punching a heavy bag with enough force to shake the ceiling beams. He stopped when she entered. He looked her up and down, sniffing the air. "You smell like ozone," he said, "like a storm about to break." "I want to train," Ivy said. Her voice was steady, commanding. The training shifted. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about dominance. Cyrus taught her Krav Maga and Muay Thai. He taught her how to disable a man twice her size in 3 seconds. He taught her how to use a Sig Sauer P365, a compact, deadly firearm he pulled from his personal armory. "Wolves are strong," Cyrus told her as she fired 3 rounds into the center of a target. "But humans have technology. To rule, you must master both." Then came the night of the full moon. They were sparring in the clearing outside the house. Cyrus was going easy on her, blocking her kicks with his forearms. Ivy felt a surge of frustration. She didn't want him to hold back. She wanted to know if she was enough. "Stop babying me!" Ivy screamed and she lunged. It happened in a heartbeat. The rage triggered the shift. There was no pain this time, only a glorious release. The sound of cracking bones echoed, and where Ivy stood, a wolf exploded into existence. She wasn't a small, sandy-colored Omega wolf like her parents. She was massive. She stood nearly at Cyrus's shoulder height. Her fur was pure, blinding white, a color not seen in the packs for 500 years, and her eyes were glowing gold. Cyrus froze. For the first time, the Alpha King looked genuinely stunned. He slowly lowered his guard and dropped to one knee, bowing his head. "A white wolf," he breathed. "The legends were true. You aren't just a royal Ivy. You are a paladin, the judge of the packs." Ivy, now Nova, her wolf fully integrated, threw her head back and howled. The sound shattered the silence of the dead zone, carrying for miles. Down in the valley, in the safety of the North Creek pack dogs, started barking, and the elders woke up in a cold sweat, feeling a terror they couldn't explain. "We have a problem," Cyrus said, walking into the living room with a tablet in his hand. It had been 6 months since the exile. Ivy was unrecognizable. She sat by the fire, sharpening a hunting knife, wearing a silk robe. The scared girl was gone. A predator sat in her place. "What is it?" Ivy asked, not looking up. "Brett is accelerating the timeline," Cyrus said, sliding the tablet across the coffee table. "He's not waiting for the 1-year probate period to claim your land. He's forged a living will with your signature stating that in the event of your death, the Sterling Orchard is to be sold immediately to pay off pack debts." Ivy picked up the tablet. It was a listing for the Winter Solstice Gala and Auction at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel in Seattle. The star item on the auction block: 500 acres of prime riverfront property. North Creek. "He's selling my family's legacy to build a casino." Ivy said, her voice deadly calm. "Who is the buyer?" "It's an open bid," Cyrus explained. "But my intel says the front-runner is the Valkyrie Group, a shell company run by a Russian oligarch, Viktor Volkov. If Volkov buys that land, he paves over the forest, and he brings drugs and trafficking right to the border of the dead zone." Ivy stood up. She walked to the window, looking at her reflection. "He thinks I'm dead," she whispered. "He does," Cyrus said, coming up behind her. He didn't touch her, but his heat radiated against her back. The tension between them had been building for months, a slow burn that was driving them both mad. But neither dared to cross the line. Not yet. The mission came first. "Then it's time to introduce him to a ghost," Ivy said. "Get the jet ready, Cyrus. We're going to Seattle." The Fairmont Olympic Hotel was dripping with old money. Chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, and the room smelled of expensive perfume and champagne. Brett Calloway stood near the bar holding a whiskey. He looked tired. The last 6 months hadn't been kind to him. The pack finances were in ruin, which was why he needed this sale. And Sasha was becoming increasingly demanding. "Stop fidgeting," Sasha hissed, clutching his arm. She was wearing a red dress that was far too flashy for the elegant crowd. "Volkov's representative is here. Just sign the papers, get the check, and we can finally buy the beach house in Malibu." "It feels wrong, Sasha," Brett muttered, looking around nervously. "I've been having nightmares. I hear her howling." "She's dead, Brett." "Get over it," Sasha snapped. Suddenly the room went quiet. The chatter died down. All heads turned toward the grand staircase. 2 figures were descending. The man was terrifyingly handsome, wearing a bespoke tuxedo that fit his broad frame perfectly. He had a scar running through his eyebrow, and silver eyes that scanned the room like a security system. It was Cyrus, though Brett didn't recognize him, without his tactical gear and mud. But it was the woman on his arm who stole the oxygen from the room. She wore a floor-length gown of emerald green velvet, with a slit that went up to her thigh, revealing a diamond-encrusted garter. Her honey hair was styled in loose, glamorous waves. She wore a masquerade mask made of black lace and emeralds covering the upper half of her face, but her lips were painted a deep blood red. She moved with a grace that was almost inhuman. Every step was deliberate. Every movement flowed like water. "Who is that?" Sasha whispered, jealousy dripping from her tone. "I don't know," Brett said, unable to look away. His wolf stirred in his chest. A deep primal whine echoed in his ribcage. "Mate, no," Brett whispered to himself. "My mate is dead." The auction began. The bidding for the Sterling Orchard started at $5 million. $5 million, the representative for the Valkyrie Group said, raising a paddle. $6 million, a local developer countered. 10 million, the Valkyrie group shouted, trying to bully the room. The auctioneer looked around. 10 million going once, 10 million going twice, 20 million. The voice was clear, melodic, and icy. The entire room gasped. The woman in the emerald dress lowered her paddle number 001. Brett's glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He knew that voice. It was impossible, but he knew that voice. The Valkyrie representative glared. 25 million. 50 million, Ivy said, not even looking at him. She was looking directly at Brett. Silence. $50 million was an absurd amount of money for undevelopable orchard land. Sold. The auctioneer slammed the gavel. To the lady in green for $50 million. Sasha was shaking. Who does she think she is? We needed that land to go to Volkov. We had a side deal. The woman in green began to walk toward them. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Cyrus walked a step behind her, his hand resting on the small of her back, a claim of possession. They stopped right in front of Brett and Sasha. Up close, the pull was undeniable. Brett felt like gravity had shifted. He wanted to fall to his knees. "Congratulations on the sale, Alpha Calloway," the woman said. Do I know you?" Brett stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. The woman reached up. With a slow, agonizing movement, she untied the ribbon of her mask. She let it fall to the floor. Brett stopped breathing. Sasha let out a strangled shriek. It was Ivy. But not the Ivy they knew. This Ivy was radiant, powerful, and terrifying. "Hello, Brett." She smiled, but her eyes were cold as the grave. "I believe you're trespassing on my property." "Ivy," Brett choked out, reaching for her. You're alive. How I regretted it. I swear I can explain." He took a step forward, but a massive hand slammed into his chest, stopping him dead. Cyrus stepped between them. He towered over Brett, his silver eyes flashing with lethal intent. "Step back, pup." Cyrus growled, his voice vibrating with alpha command, so strong it made Brett's knees buckle. "You are speaking to the future queen of the Western Alliance, and if you try to touch her again, I will rip your arm off and beat you to death with it." Ivy placed a hand on Cyrus's chest, calming him. She looked at Sasha, who was trembling. "The money I just paid you," Ivy said softly. "Don't spend it. You're going to need it for the lawyers, because I'm not just taking back my land. I'm suing you for attempted murder, fraud, and embezzlement, and I have the recordings." She leaned in close to Sasha, whispering, so only she could hear. "Run, Sasha, run fast, because the hunt has just begun." Ivy turned on her heel, her emerald dress swirling around her, and walked away, leaving Brett Calloway broken amidst the shards of his whiskey glass. The fallout from the auction was nuclear. The news that Ivy Sterling was alive and wealthy spread through the Western Wolf Alliance like wildfire. But Brett Calloway wasn't giving up. He was desperate. The Valkyrie group was demanding their money back for the failed land deal, and the Pack Council was investigating his finances. He had one card left to play: the mate bond. 2 days after the auction, Ivy returned to her childhood home, the small cottage on the edge of the orchard she had just bought back. She was alone, having convinced Cyrus to let her have 1 hour of peace to pack her grandmother's things. She was placing a porcelain doll into a box when the door creaked open. "Get out, Brett," Ivy said without turning around. She could smell his desperation. It smelled like sour milk and cheap cologne. "Ivy, please," Brett pleaded, stepping into the room. He looked disheveled. His eyes were bloodshot. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but you can't deny what we are. I am your Alpha. You are my Luna. It's biology." Ivy turned slowly. She didn't look at him with love. She looked at him with the clinical detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. "You rejected me," she reminded him. "You cut my hair. You drove me to the dead zone." "I was under pressure," Brett shouted, falling to his knees. "Sasha! She threatened to release photos of my father's gambling debts. I did it to save the pack. But now you have money. You have power. We can rule together, Ivy. We can be the power couple of the West. Just call off the lawyers. Come back to my bed." Ivy laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound. "You think this is about money? You think you can buy forgiveness?" "I'm your mate," Brett roared, his ego fracturing. He lunged for her, his hand reaching for her throat to force submission, a forbidden alpha move. Crash! The window shattered. A canister rolled into the room, hissing. "Gas!" Brett choked, covering his mouth. It wasn't tear gas. It was wolfsbane vapor. High concentration. Ivy coughed, her knees buckling. Brett collapsed instantly. Through the haze, the door was kicked open. 4 men in tactical gear stormed in. They weren't pack warriors. They were rogues mercenaries. And behind them walked Sasha. Sasha was wearing a gas mask. She held a suppressed pistol. "You just couldn't stay dead, could you, bitch?" Sasha's muffled voice came through the mask. She aimed the gun at Ivy's head. "Brett is an idiot. He thinks he can charm you. I know the only way to fix a problem is to bury it." Ivy's vision blurred. The wolfsbane was paralyzing her motor functions. She tried to reach for the knife in her boot, but her fingers wouldn't work. "Say hello to your grandmother." Sasha sneered, her finger tightening on the trigger. Whack! An arrow, black and sleek, pierced Sasha's hand, pinning it to the wooden doorframe. Sasha screamed, dropping the gun. The roof of the cottage exploded inward. It wasn't a bomb. It was a man. Cyrus dropped from the rafters, landing in a crouch between Ivy and the mercenaries. He wasn't wearing a mask. He didn't need one. His blood was so potent it burned through toxins before they could take hold. He stood up, his silver eyes glowing with a violence that made the air vibrate. He didn't shift into a wolf. He didn't need to. The beast inside the man was terrifying enough. "You touched her," Cyrus whispered. The sound was worse than a shout. It was a death sentence. The 4 mercenaries rushed him. It was a massacre. Cyrus moved faster than the eye could follow. He caught the first mercenary's punch, twisted the arm until the bone snapped with a sickening crunch, and used the man as a human shield against the others. He kicked the second man through the drywall. The third man drew a knife, but Cyrus grabbed him by the throat and lifted him one-handed off the ground, squeezing until the struggle stopped. The 4th mercenary turned to run. "Nova!" Cyrus barked. Ivy, fighting through the paralysis with pure rage, forced her shift. Her bones cracked, reshaped, and suddenly the massive white wolf stood in the cottage. She pounced, her jaws clamped around the fleeing mercenary's leg, dragging him back, screaming. Silence fell over the cottage, broken only by Sasha's whimpering as she tried to pull the arrow from her hand. Cyrus walked over to Brett, who was still gasping on the floor, paralyzed but conscious. Cyrus crouched down, grabbing Brett by the hair and lifting his face to look at the carnage. "Look at your Luna," Cyrus growled, pointing at Sasha. "She hired hits on your mate. She tried to kill you both to cover her tracks. And you chose her over a queen." Cyrus stood up and turned to Ivy in wolf form. He bowed his head slightly. "The Pack Council is outside," Cyrus said. "I called them 10 minutes ago. They heard everything." The front wall of the cottage seemed to dissolve as floodlights hit them. Elder Thomas and the entire High Council of the Western Alliance walked in, flanked by enforcers. Elder Thomas looked at Sasha pinned to the wall. He looked at Brett, cowering on the floor. Then he looked at the White Wolf. The old man dropped to one knee. "The Paladin," Thomas whispered. "The prophecy is real." One by one, the enforcers' wolves who had served Brett for years dropped their weapons and knelt. They weren't kneeling to Brett. They were kneeling to Ivy. The coup was over. The Queen had risen. The trial of Brett Calloway and Sasha Thorne was not held in a courtroom. It was held in the ancient stone circle in the center of the Dead Zone, now reclaimed and renamed the Sanctuary. Thousands of wolves from packs all over the West Coast gathered. They stood in silence as Ivy sat on a throne carved from obsidian. She wore a simple white dress, her hair loose a crown of woven silver thorns on her head. Next to her, on a matching throne, sat Cyrus. Brett and Sasha were dragged into the center of the circle. They were stripped of their rank marks. They wore grey rags, the clothes of the Omegas they had tormented. Elder Thomas read the charges. Attempted murder, treason, embezzlement of pack funds, conspiracy with rogue factions. "How do you plead?" Thomas asked. "She made me do it," Brett sobbed, pointing at Sasha. "I'm the Alpha. I was manipulated." "He's a liar," Sasha screamed, her face pale. "He planned it all. He wanted her money." Ivy stood up. The crowd went silent. "Enough," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the valley. "I don't care whose idea it was. You both held the knife." She walked down the steps of the dais until she stood inches from Brett. "You exiled me to the woods to die," Ivy said. "You thought I was weak. You thought I was nothing." "Ivy, please," Brett whispered. "I loved you once." "No," Ivy said. "You loved owning me." She turned to the enforcers. "The sentence is not death." A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Death was the standard punishment for treason. "Death is too easy," Ivy continued. "You wanted to banish me to the Dead Zone, then you shall live in it, but not as wolves." Cyrus stood up. He raised his hand. A shaman from the ancient tribes stepped forward, holding a vial of glowing blue liquid. "This is a severance potion," Cyrus boomed. "It will strip your wolf from your soul. You will be human, weak, slow, blind in the dark." Brett screamed as the enforcers forced his mouth open. Sasha fought biting and scratching, but they poured the liquid down her throat. They convulsed on the ground, agonizing screams tearing from their throats as their connection to the pack, to the magic, to their inner wolves was severed violently. When they looked up, their eyes were dull, flat, human. "You are exiled from all pack lands," Ivy commanded. "You have 1 hour to run. If any wolf finds you after sunset, the hunt begins." Brett and Sasha scrambled to their feet, sobbing, and ran into the tree line, the same tree line where they had dumped Ivy months ago. But this time they had no protection. Ivy watched them go. She felt empty. But it was a clean emptiness. The rot was gone. She felt a warm hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Cyrus. "It is done," he said softly. "Is it?" Ivy asked. "I have a pack to fix, a region to heal. I don't know if I can do it alone." Cyrus smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't a diamond. It was a band of black steel inlaid with a piece of the meteorite that had fallen in the forest centuries ago, the source of their power. He dropped to one knee in front of thousands of witnesses. "You will never be alone again, Ivy Sterling," Cyrus said. "I have spent 500 years guarding these woods, waiting for a partner who could run with me without getting eaten. You are the only thing in this world I fear, and the only thing I cannot live without." He looked up at her, his silver eyes shining with devotion. "Be my queen. Rule the alliance with me, not as my Luna, but as my equal." Ivy looked at the ring. She looked at the man who had picked her up when she was broken and taught her how to be unbreakable. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder for the crowd, "Yes." Cyrus stood and kissed her. It was a kiss that sealed a dynasty. The crowd erupted into howls, a deafening chorus of approval that shook the trees. Epilogue. 5 years later. The nursery was quiet. Ivy stood over the crib, watching the 2 sleeping babies. One had tufts of honey-colored hair. The other had hair as black as night. "They're finally asleep," Cyrus whispered, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. He kissed the mark on her neck, the mating mark that had healed into a silver scar. "They're going to be trouble." Ivy smiled, leaning back into him. The boy already growled at the nanny. "Good," Cyrus chuckled. "Strong wolves." They walked out onto the balcony of the glass fortress. The forest below was no longer the evil forest. It was a sanctuary. Lights from the expanded Pack village twinkled in the valley. The dead zone was alive. "Do you ever think about them?" Cyrus asked, looking at the distant highway. "Who?" Ivy asked. "The ones who came before." Ivy looked at the moon full and bright. "No," she said. "I only think about what comes next." She turned in his arms, her golden green eyes flashing. "Ready for a run, Alpha. Always my queen." They shifted in mid-air, a massive black wolf and a sleek white wolf landing on the soft earth below. They ran into the night side by side, ruling the darkness they once feared. And that, my friends, is why you never kick a wolf when she's down. She might just come back leading the pack. I hope you got chills when Ivy revealed herself at the auction, because I definitely did. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the worst betrayal is just the push you need to find your true power. If you enjoyed Ivy and Cyrus's story of revenge and redemption, please destroy that like button. It helps the channel so much. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good alpha female comeback story. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification